Oh, hello, everyone. We have the end of a journey in a way here in two different ways. One, the first month of the CFL season in the books, 4 weeks have been played. But also, two, this is the last episode of the 200s, at episode 299. And who better to have CFL talk with than David Morisuti, Frank Stanishi, aka the guys, my press box pals. We all sit in a row together at BMO Field. But less of that, more of this. Gentlemen, how are we doing tonight now that we're into July?
I can't believe it's already July.
Yeah, I can't believe we're already. Some teams are 4 games into the season, so some are 3 games. Like it's crazy to think that we're not a third of the. We're almost a third of the way through the season. Like so,
Yeah.
sorry, not a third,
Yeah.
a quarter.
And who would have thought that Calgary was threatening to be an ofer?
I mean,
They have
Winnipeg.
been a pleasant surprise. But Winnipeg 0-4, Hamilton 0-4, Ottawa's 2-1. There's like I look at the power rankings today. There's just a lot of parity in this league to where look, Hamilton is more of just they shot themselves in their own foot and they just set themselves up for disaster like they did on Sunday. But with Winnipeg, it's just week after week after week of just like, okay, this is the one they're gonna win. This is the one they're gonna win. And then last week, Rene Pardes, just if I butchered his name, I'm sorry, basically went out there with this big foot of his and just said, "Look, I'm going to outkick Sergio. Stampeders are going to beat the Bombers in Calgary."
Well, I think the big one here is when you're looking at what's. I mean, look, I'm one of the people that remain off the Hamilton train until they show me that they can dominate, which they have not been able to do. The last, ever since 2019, they have not been the same team. Like that reign of dominance is kind of where they were a good team, especially in the regular season. I think that's kind of over. But the one thing for me, yeah, Winnipeg's age is showing. Guys are getting
Yep.
hurt. That offensive line is nowhere near what it used to be. The defense isn't what it used to be either. Calgary is a surprise. I think they've had a pretty light schedule, and eventually, I think Jake Kamara is going to come back to earth a little bit. I don't think he's going to be
Yeah.
the quarterback he is right now. But the thing that Calgary has going for them right now is they're in a positive spot right now, while Winnipeg is behind. 0-4 might look daunting, but with the way the West is and with the way Edmonton is, and there's not really that clear cut top team right now in the West. There's an opportunity there. There's definitely an opportunity there
Yes.
um, for teams to kind of get themselves back into shape. But yeah, I think it's just very interesting to see which teams have been struggling right off the hop.
So the one big thing I look at too, especially with Winnipeg, because I pulled up their schedule. So they obviously have Ottawa on Friday, but then they have Stampeders, Rough Riders, Argonauts. But then here's the kicker: they play 3 games in the month of August, and two of them are against BC. So those are games where look, you got it, and one of them's at home, and one of them's in BC in Vancouver, a building where basically they have to go into now and win. We know last year they were able to take care of them. Obviously, there was the one game, but when it mattered most, Winnipeg got the win. I just think they're one of those things where look, it's injuries, it's age, it's everything. Because I still remember the bus ride back after the Grey Cup of where every single person in there was just saying we don't know what's going to happen for them. I think everyone just assumed the same. Hey, they're going to be back, they're going to be fine. But we quickly learned that obviously the NFL is a big year-to-year league, but the CFL is a true year-to-year league where one year you're on the king of the mountaintop, the next year you're down. Like look at how the 2022 Toronto Argonauts rose above, went to the Grey Cup, won the Grey Cup last year, run of dominance ended by Montreal. Now Montreal's kind of filling those shoes. Where last year, solid run to end the season, win the Grey Cup, and now off to a 4-0 start, and it's like what I was telling you, Frank, on Friday night, death by a thousand cuts. So it's just so interesting with this league how it's so unpredictable in so many ways.
I think the only predictability is the lack of predictability in the Canadian Football League, and it is something that makes the game really interesting. But what I'm seeing this year is I get it. Edmonton is 0-4. I even get Hamilton is 0-4. But Winnipeg 0-4, and I misspoke. I said Calgary. I meant to say Winnipeg. Um, them being 0-4, I'm going to throw in what happens with great teams is other teams figure them out.
Yes.
We all know that tape matters, right? And teams and football in general is a sport that's made for diagnosing the opposition and coming up with a plan to make them not as dominant as they can be. And then what happens is other teams replicate that plan. And so a team like Winnipeg that's had to pay some guys more money than they did before and have had to sort of create a bit of a patchwork team in its depth, which is the strength of every great team. So that's that's the way I see Winnipeg. They have to rebuild on the spot, and that's what eventually great teams have to do.
That's
No,
what
no,
exactly I was going to. Oh,
yeah.
what were you going to say? Go on.
No, I think that's especially true. The CFL coaching has gotten better. Like I think that's the other thing too is coaches are learning from mistakes, especially Ottawa's learning from mistakes. Edmonton's a team right now. I think they're the most unluckiest team in the league.
They're the
Some of it's
bridesmaids
in
of the
their,
CFL.
like some of it's their own doing, but some of it's just like, man, they should be a team that's 3-1 or 4-0. Like seriously, they played well enough to be. But the thing is, and I've said it with Edmonton too. And I talked to our good buddies Ben Grant and JB about it. I said this is a team that needs to learn how to win. They are playing
Yes.
good football, but they haven't figured out how to win. I mean, that's a very distinct characteristic, and that's what Montreal has learned to do. That's what Toronto has learned to do, and that's what BC has learned to do to a degree.
You can throw
And
Ottawa in there too. They are
yeah,
2-1.
Ottawa too, right? Don't that game? You're just looking at it, you're just like Hamilton scores a touchdown. It's like, yeah, but they only need a field goal to win. And the thing that Ottawa has, and in my opinion, we talk about like last year with Javon Lee. The only other kicker, in my opinion, that's when the ball's in his hands, you're just at the mercy of what he's able to do is Devontae Dedman. Because you can game plan for him as much as you want, and we saw that on Sunday. They tried very hard not to let it get into his hands. Nope, he got it. He took care of it. He brought it up into a position where they only needed a couple plays to really get themselves into that field goal range. And then, I'll say this: I'm very happy for Ottawa because those fans have stuck by that team and they're being rewarded, and that's what I like to see from an Ottawa
Yep.
standpoint.
The other thing I want to say about Ottawa too, it's just unfortunate. It seems like it rains every single home game that they have, but I feel like they brought in more than coaching, learning how to win. They've brought in a lot of guys who have that like winning pedigree. Bringing in guys like a Dominique Grimes, bringing in Darius Pickett. Getting guys from cultures of winning. Like obviously, look, BC. I know BC hasn't won the Grey Cup in a while, but still, there was that winning formula that they had in place. They have a very strong team in the West. Pickett, same thing with Toronto. We know Pickett was a very vocal leader in that locker room last year. So to bring all that in for Ottawa, I like to see them to even rebound after getting punched in the mouth by Montreal week 3. Because that was a pure just up and down. They got their butts whooped for 60 minutes. To then come out and look, when it mattered most, you now have a guy like Drew Brown that, hey, the fans can trust. You have, like you said, beating. I totally blanked on this that the Red Blacks haven't beat the Ticats since 2018. I believe it was like almost 1,000-something days the last time they beat them. So they're slowly learning and it's slowly paying off. And like you said too, the fans really deserve it because obviously look, Toronto has like the fan problem. We all know that just with attendance and everything. But like all these other markets, when the going gets good, the fans are going to show out and the fans are going to respect it. But with Ottawa, for those ones who stuck around, it's just even, how do you say, the sweet, it's just like the juice just tastes a little bit sweeter. So that's with it there. And then with Edmonton, they're weird because they're 4-0 against the spread on the year, I believe. They might be 3-1, but still, the fact that they're 0-4, I think it's just bad luck. But then with Hamilton, it's been 4 weeks of just bad execution and just bad plays at the wrong time. And even I think they personally allowed Ottawa to keep up with them. If they basically just stepped on the gas, they would have won. But no, they said, we're fine, we're good. And then what's your reward? Sunday night, you got the BC Lions coming to town. That screams a must-win game. If Hamilton can win that game, they're going to start to say, "Hey, we can turn the ship around." But who knows? Especially like a day like today when they had to fire their teams coordinator.
Yeah, I'm.
A week when kickers were dominant.
Yes.
It's crazy to think. It is crazy to think like you're already with Ottawa. I mean Hamilton. How many years? I would say like the last 3 years, Frank, that they have had abysmal starts to their years and have to play catch up. But here's the thing about Hamilton that's different this year. They had always relied on Ottawa being so bad that they could just sneak in to the playoffs. Now, in my opinion, there's two things that's the problem with that for Hamilton this year. One, Ottawa is going to be better. Two, the crossover I still think is a potential here, right? Like if Edmonton can get their acting gear, we might be able to see a crossover on top of that as well.
We don't think that. Well, Hamilton, you said, as you said, slow starts. They had that season where they weren't going to make the playoffs. Everybody believed they weren't going to make the playoffs, and then they had a great finish, which I predicted they could do. Only because I don't give up on teams. The problem with Hamilton right now is, learning how to win. I don't think is exactly what their problem is. I think their problem is they don't know. They don't know what it takes to win, and they're not doing what it takes to win. Um, I get learning, but it's just their quarterback isn't the quarterback that he was, and this is again the same thing we were talking about with Winnipeg, where the book's out on Winnipeg. It's been out, people have been working on it for years. Well, the same is true for Bo Levi Mitchell, right? People have been working on. At some point, a quarterback, if he doesn't change, if he's not able to switch things up and become less predictable, what happens is what's happening with Bo Levi Mitchell. That is, he can't make the kind of plays he's strong at because he basically isn't being given the chance to be who Bo Levi Mitchell is. So he has to become 0.20 or whatever.
I also looked ahead to Hamilton's schedule quickly, and obviously they play BC this Sunday. We'll get into week 5 in a bit, but they have their bye week, and then they have the game against Toronto as well, which we'll also talk about Toronto, but like that's going to be a game where, especially if they lose Sunday, if they lose that game as well, that's just going to crush the spirits of not just the team, but like the fans as well, because we all know that's the game that they want to win. That's the game, they all love to win. Last year, like, the joy on Hamilton's face is knowing that they didn't have to see Toronto in their building playing the Grey Cup was just like they were just jubilant about it. But I just think with Hamilton, it's just self-inflicted wounds. It's not like how a Toronto Friday night it was like, hey, it was a bit of that. But as Frank has all his amazing backgrounds, I got to say, Hamilton's they just got to figure it out. And I think BC's that game where look, you can figure it out against a team like the Lions, you're fine. But if you can't figure it out against the BC Lions, it's not a knock on them. I'm just saying. Toronto built the formula to beat them, but no other team's been able to do it since. So if Hamilton can somehow get a win against the BC Lions, it'll be a huge confidence booster as we get some cat-on-cat violence this Sunday in Hamilton.
Well, I think for Hamilton, like last year, they pulled off some impressive wins down the stretch that gave you a little of hope that they were actually they were starting to figure it out. The problem here is you can't when you're playing catch up like they are, then you have to start playing desperate, and desperate teams eventually it catches up to them.
Yeah,
it catches up to you at some point, and I think that's the issue for Hamilton right now is they're playing catch up. Now, do they have a little bit of an excuse this year? In a way, yes, because you got a new head coach. Technically, he was there last year, but he's trying to get things done his way. But you also have to me, the big one here is Hamilton had a chance to say, you know what, it just didn't work. It hasn't worked. Yeah. Let's really make change. And they didn't really do it, right? Like, I get it. You're really committed to Bo Levi Mitchell. And that's a team, and that's an organization that has to win, put themselves in a position to be competitive, because the fan base won't take anything less than that, right? So I do get that. But at the same time, it's like you also need to realize when the formula is not working and decide that a change needs to be made, right? The big one here for me with Hamilton is Bo Levi Mitchell, good quarterback, but what do they give him to work with? Right? They don't really have they didn't really go out and address like the offensive line for a guy who was always getting hurt. They didn't really bring in a run. Like the thing about Calgary, when he was in Calgary, yes, he was such a prolific passer. He always had a running game too that he could check down to, that could take a little bit of the pressure off of him. Now, this touchdown that he threw to Tim White against Ottawa, one of the few times I've seen him bounce out of the pocket while kind of moving and finding the open receiver. But that's not Bo Levi Mitchell's game. He is like a Ricky Ray in a way. So
Yeah, well, especially when you're got a corner route.
One thing I was going to say quickly about the Tim White thing is I felt good about him because I actually started listening to the Waggle as well, the podcast that's on with Ben and Enoch, and they said like they were waiting for the Tim White game. And so I may have, so every week for my media, like for Crier, I always write articles about best bets, but I've been including a fun bet. My fun bet for this week was actually Tim White's over in yards and for him to get a touchdown. And it hit. So I'm kind of thankful for that. But I feel like with Hamilton, too, they beefed up more on defense than offense this offseason. They basically looked at the Toronto Argonauts defense and said, you played really well against us. We're going to take Jamal Peters, Brandon Barlow. Now they have, I don't know his last name, but they picked up Benoit off waivers. So,
Benoit Marion.
Benoit Marion on waivers, which when he was released, I wasn't too surprised just because he's a special teamer. Benoit, if you hear that, that's not on you. You're a much larger gentleman than I am. But all in all, look, Hamilton, they just got to figure it out, and they got to figure it out quick because, like, just a quick look ahead for them. It's BC, Toronto, Edmonton, but then they have 2 in a row against Montreal. They go to Montreal, and Montreal comes to Hamilton. So it might be too little too late. That's where you guys start picking up wins now because Montreal is a team that's clicking in all cylinders, and we saw that Friday night as Montreal beat Toronto. But my biggest takeaway from that game that I loved the best was the fact that Toronto basically said, you know what? We had a bad day at the office. Just couldn't get anything going. We'll learn from this. We'll move on. We'll move forward. So when you look ahead for this week for both these teams, mainly Toronto, because that's the team the three of us pay the most attention to, what are the areas where you're like, hey, I think they'll be fine with, but what are the areas too where you're like, hey, that might be a bit of a concern going forward?
Stop their offense once in a while.
Yeah, I talked to Ryan Dinwiddie today, and like I was just asking him like about the defense and stuff like that, and it's like I kind of in a way brought up the fact that this team doesn't turn the ball over a lot. They were one of the tops in the CFL in turnovers, and like right now, teams have like they made some big changes on that defense, not just the coordinators. You lost your cornerbacks. You lost Quantez Stiggers and you lost Jamal Peters, 2 of your biggest playmakers on defense. With 2 let's call them unproven guys. Like this week, they're going to be starting Eduardo at corner, right? Like they're making more change because they've realized like they're not getting off the, as Frank said, they're not getting off the field. Last week it was more so I think penalties, right, and then those extra plays as well. There's just been a lot of uncharacteristic play from Toronto from a defensive perspective. Robert Priester, he's back. First game back, and he literally he was back at practice, and he's being thrown into the Sam linebacker position, which is one of the tougher positions to play on the defense. And I asked him what's the thing you have to do, and he's like, communicate. We just got to be communicating the entire time. And I said, well, I mean, you've been watching this team ever since you were cut. What have you noticed? He's like, we just got to keep pulling together, right? Like I think it's a way of saying like we haven't played to our potential, but you have to keep working at it. You have to kind of understand that you got to keep the confidence. I think maybe there's a little bit of a confidence issue too, like doubt in a way about, especially from the secondary. That's been I think kind of the bigger problem from Toronto because they've got the defensive line. Their linebackers are pretty solid, minus them not having their starting Sam linebacker. it's the secondary that kind of I think needs to pick it up, right? Get the stops on second and long. Put yourself in a positive position in terms of the field position battle, because teams have also, even though they've had to punt, they're punting in a position where we're able to pin the Argos offense deeper than they'd like to be.
The Argos are a team that defensively likes to rotate. When you lose a couple of the key guys in the rotation, that means now everybody in the rotation has to play that much better or be that much more significant. That's the issue they're dealing with defensively. So they're trying to learn how to play the game and also learn many of the positions that I assume it's Dinwiddie and Pinball, because I don't think it was just Corey Mace that like this idea of switching players around. It also helps in keeping the packages a surprise for the offense that you're playing, that they're not really sure what you're going to throw at them. But on that token, it's going to take a while for them to adjust. And just like Hamilton, and this is the key point, when you make change, you have to know what change is going to work down the road. Not the change that immediately how it works, but long term how that change is going to work. And also on the other side, you have to be patient. So the question for the Toronto defense and the Hamilton team in general is the changes that they've made. Are they enough looking down the road, and can they predict success down the road? That's what they're gambling on. If they're not making changes, then they're gambling on the guys they have, which, as far as I'm concerned, is better than keep rotating guys and bringing guys in and out. So I'm not one of those people that agrees with the fact that Hamilton needs to make changes. The hope is that they made the right choices in training camp. And if no injuries happen, then the predictability of who should be good, because they're taking a close look at a player at this point in time, and then use their experience and understanding of the game of football to predict their upside and ensure that it shows up. So all that I'm saying is that patience is always in order. For the Argo defense, patience is going to need to be in order. But when you've been a team that's had guys come in, for example, Stiggers, who didn't play college football, he comes in and dominates. How often can you hit that lightning in the bottle? And that's what helps make championship teams. And the Argos don't have big play guys to David's point. They haven't shown to have any big play guys. We haven't seen any really big plays. We haven't seen any pick sixes. We haven't seen any great defensive plays. We've seen a team that struggles defensively. Anybody who doesn't see that is not watching a football game. All I'm saying is that what the Argos are, or is it something they can change? They need to.
You know what? I think they're a work in progress. So basically, you got to learn how to ride the bike with training wheels before you fully ride the bike. I think it's the best way to put this. They had, because the first two games, like they were getting close, but then the offense was able to bail them out. The offense was able to help them. But when we noticed on Friday night was, hey, when the offense isn't there, defense really shows its warts, because the amount of second and longs they were giving up, the amount of just simple plays that were, back to my death by 1,000 cuts metaphor, where it's just play after play after play, where, look, they're going to run it down the field. They're going to do this. It didn't take Noel Thorpe running in unbelievable defensive game plan against Toronto to win. No, it took basically the offense of Montreal and Anthony Calvillo and Jason Moss to basically know, hey, we can give the ball to Cody, and Cody's going to go out there and find his receivers. He's going to find Philpott. He's going to find Speaker. He's going to find, what's the guy's name I'm blanking on? Some hyphenated green.
Julian Grant.
Excuse me. He's going to find the guys there. Even too, they have all the pieces too. David Cote his leg was reliable too, and even still, it's kind of weird that Toronto allowed this to happen. But like I said, the fact that they kind of know, hey, we're going to get back into this and fine, is reassuring to know, hey, they know where they need to fix and get better and move forward. I also know, because one of the questions I asked was just about getting away from home, because obviously their first three were at home in the year. And I honestly think that the next three games being away from BMO Field is going to help them more, especially after a bad loss. Because if it was, Thursday nights at Toronto, who knows what the energy is going to be like around the stadium. But now they get to get away from home. Obviously, they're going into a hostile environment, and against a former coach. But, maybe it helps them in the long run, especially to considering what the injury concerns are for Saskatchewan. No Trevor Harris, no Sean Bain Jr. It's going to be interesting to see what Shane Patterson does for the Rough Riders on Thursday night against Toronto.
Coverage wasn't the problem for the Argos; it was tackles. The
Yeah,
yak kept killing them in second and long.
yeah, that's what I was saying. It's like I know Cody would just like basically what they did was they let Cody be Cody, and when you let Cody be Cody, Cody will burn you. We saw that
And
last
he
year in the
has the
playoffs.
playmakers. We've talked
Yeah.
about playmakers, that the Argos don't have any playmakers. Well, that's what killed them on Friday. Montreal were making plays. It is, that's what good teams, great teams do. Can the Argos be a great team again? Not until they figure out how to be a good team.
That's why I think games like Thursday are so important for them to go and win. That's just the matter of the fact. Before we go into Thursday's slate, I want this week's slate. Excuse me, it starts with Thursday night. If the two of you had to pick a team that you've been pleasantly surprised by and a team that you've been disappointed by based on preseason expectations, which way would you lean and why so far throughout this first month of the season?
Oh, can you guys still hear me? My screen froze, by the way.
I can hear you.
Okay, good. Surprise of the season. For me, it's probably that Calgary has played better all around game than expected. Like offensively, they're doing enough, but I think that's a team that's punching a bit above its weight right now. I don't think that's going to last, personally.
And positively,
I mean, the positive is that the defense is playing so well, right? And that's what's keeping them in a like. That's a team that's playing in a way that's keeping everything going, right? It's if the quarterback's making a mistake, the defense is able to pick them up. So I guess Calgary is playing. They're playing a better overall game, even though not all the parts are coming together in the way they probably would like to. But I mean, at the same time, like you look at Saskatchewan, that's a team that's playing with a lot of confidence. I think they're embracing what Corey Mace is trying to sell. And that's not easy to do as a rookie head coach.
Last year, they weren't that bad a team last year. They just ran into some bad luck and absence of a starting.
Well, they're about to be tested with Trevor Harris out for another 6 weeks at minimum.
And a coach who knows what Mace is capable of and knows what Olette can do.
Yeah.
Yeah. To answer your question, I'll say it this way: I'm surprised between Calgary and Winnipeg. I would have thought, well, not going by preseason, but going by what it looked like it should be. I would have thought that I wouldn't. I'm surprised that Calgary's 2-1 and Winnipeg's 0-4. That surprises me. But 2-1 isn't too deep into the season. Neither is 0-4. In the Eastern Division, I'm not surprised by Ottawa in the truest sense of surprise. I anticipated and expected this team to play like this for the past 2-3 years, and they have not. So I guess that makes it a surprise. I'm definitely not surprised as Toronto's having problems, not being perfect. 2-1 isn't bad, but they're doing it with a backup quarterback. We really do have to put this in perspective. They're playing with a backup quarterback, which is the death knell for every team in the Canadian Football League when they lose their starting quarterback. Hamilton is a surprise only in the sense that I thought they would be better than 0-4. 0-4, I just didn't see them doing that good.
Yeah, I'm the same way with Hamilton. They were the disappointment to me just because I was kind of on the train, but I kind of had to do a barrel roll off the Hamilton Ticat train, just like boom, like I thought that, hey, you know what, there's some stuff there. One thing I think with them as well is the fact that last preseason game they basically benched all their starters. They didn't play anyone. Like they played like some big guys, but they didn't play like Bo. I don't think got any snaps in that game. It was mainly the backups. Maybe him playing in both preseason games would have helped. But you know what? They got to get their act together quickly. And for mine, Calgary. I'm going to say two things with Calgary and Ottawa. I think Calgary is the team where teams that play to their level they will beat. The second they run into teams that are much better than them, like what happened against BC and what I think is going to happen on Saturday night in La Belle Province, that's the games they're going to lose. That's where you kind of see the real warts of Calgary come out, where you're like, hey, you're a good team, but you're not like the team. You know, you're not going to beat the big dogs of the CFL. Ottawa, on the other hand, I think there's going to be I think Ottawa's in for a roller coaster ride. I feel like with them, it's going to be like kind of like up and down, where it's like, you know, 1 week they'll play good, 1 week they'll play bad. But I think Bob Dice and I think guys like Pickett and Rhymes and other players on that team are going to be able to know, hey, week in and week out, take it 1 week at a time. You know, don't dwell on the bad losses. Let the loss happen, kind of like what we see in Toronto. That's why I have some faith in Toronto to rebound and bounce back, because you know they know, hey, we had a bad week, we had a bad game. Don't dwell on it. Just move on to the next week and go 1-0 on that week. So we'll see what happens there. I don't want to say I'm surprised by Edmonton, just because I didn't expect too much out of them this year. It's just eventually the dam's got to break for them eventually, and I feel like they're that team where if it breaks, I wouldn't be shocked if they went on like maybe a nice little 2 or 3 game run, maybe even 4, where it's kind of like, oh, look at Edmonton. But then I think it might just be too little too late because they shot themselves in the foot too early. But you know what? The beautiful thing with the CFL is they still have 2 months to make up a lot of ground, because if they can be in it by Labor Day, who knows what their true limit is.
The only problem with Edmonton is they can't go 0-6 because they won't be doing it with Chris Jones.
Nope. That's the thing. I think if there's 2 more games, then I think he's gone.
They can't go 0-6. They go 0-6. It's time for them to move on from Chris Jones. He's lost the ability to create a winner in that place. You know, that doesn't mean he's not a winner. This isn't sometimes situations. Well, look at what happened when Montreal got their quarterback, right? Last year. He was in Saskatchewan, and you know, he was being ridden really hard. People are really getting on him. And so, you know, that's the way life is, right? Sometimes you're in a situation that doesn't work, and getting out of that situation and into one that's a little better, A, and B, in the Canadian Football League, this is the exhibition season. I'm sorry, and I hope the league doesn't get mad at me, but this is the exhibition season. The season really starts on Labor Day. You know, we can flip this any way we want. The changes that teams will make based on what they learn between now and Labor Day, like Montreal, who went on that, 5-game winning streak, it brought them to the Grey Cup, and they won the Grey Cup because they had the momentum starting in Labor
Day. The big one here for me is just when you talk about Edmonton, I think you guys are right. That's a team, like, if I'm not mistaken, trying to get a new owner too.
Yes.
And I don't know how you sell an owner right now on a team that's lost so much over the last 5 years, right? So yeah, that's a team that's eventually going to have to show that they're trying to put themselves in the right direction, right? And so yeah, I think Frank's right too. Like, a team right now can't count themselves out, even if like Winnipeg's 0-4. The season doesn't start till like I'm a little earlier. I said just a couple weeks before Labor Day. Labor Day is like for the teams that really want to compete, that they really have to make that push, right? Like, you have to be in a good position to start turning your season around just ahead of Labor Day, because then Labor Day is kind of where, all right, coaches really want to dig in. They really want teams to get on a run. Montreal, perfect example of that. They haven't lost 11 straight from last season through this year, right? It's possible for a team that, the thing is, Montreal wasn't a terrible team. They were kind of around the edge, right? They were kind of in the middle there, and then they went on that run. So a team like Edmonton has to get a few wins under their belt, get close to that 500 mark to say, okay, we're ready to turn that corner. We're just waiting for that opportunity.
That's 100% it. They also do Edmonton. The thing with Edmonton as well is they've played all very good teams. They played Saskatchewan. They played Toronto. I'm blanking on who they played week 2. You know, they've like, it's not like they haven't just like played the slouches of the league. No, they're playing pretty decent competition right now. Like, let's just check. They played Saskatchewan. They played Montreal. They played Toronto, and they played BC. Those are 4 pretty good teams. If you have to say probably the top 4 teams in the league right now, I don't think anyone would fight you on that. But they have 3 games in July, 2 against Ottawa and 1 against Hamilton. They can walk away 2-1 in that stretch, and you know, hey, you're 2-5 going into August. August is the Rough Riders, the Lions, the Ticats, and the Alouettes. So, and then they have 2 in a row. And then it's kind of funny because they play the Stampeders and the Bombers for September. So these games where you're playing the teams that you can beat, those are the games you have to win.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Another
I always say.
another backup to what you're saying is they've only been outscored by 17 points in the 4 games by those 4 teams. That speaks well to their defense and their competitiveness.
Yeah, 100%. But anyway, gentlemen, like we said, the first 4 weeks of the season are done. Week 5 is here. I have the full slate right here on the board. Starts Thursday night, presented by New York Fries. Saskatchewan Roughriders hosting the Toronto Argonauts, where at first Toronto was the underdog, but Toronto now has been the favorite. No Trevor Harris, no Sean Bain Jr. Where do we lean for this one? Do we see Saskatchewan improve to 4-0, or does Toronto find a way to bounce back after not the best effort against the Montreal Alouettes last Friday?
Well, the emotions are going to be very high in Mosaic with the Argos coming in, and it's going to be an interesting feeling. And Mace is the kind of guy that players go to the walls for him. I think that game's going to be a game where if the Argos aren't playing well, it could get ugly. They could win, but it could get ugly. But I'm thinking this will be Saskatchewan's game.
I'm leaning more towards Toronto just because coming off a loss, this is a team that's really built on forgetting they got a short memory here in a lot of ways. And I also just think with Saskatchewan, they got injury at quarterback. You got a rookie quarterback starting. Toronto's goal is going to be can you keep AJ Willett out? Can you make sure that he does not have he's not the reason why you lose? And I think they understand that, and that's going to be a big factor in this game. I just think Toronto, their balance, and I think Saskatchewan's going to have a tough time with that defense, with Toronto's defense, especially the pressure up front. A lot of athletes there, a lot of guys that can kind of move around and make things tough. Corey Mace obviously knows a lot of those guys, but there's a lot of both sides kind of know the schemes. I just think that there's the inexperience of Corey Mace as a head coach. And I want to see if that's going to be a factor in this game.
One player I'm looking to break, I'm calling an X factor on defense because I've been waiting to see him really, have a moment like he did last year, and that's number 48. That's Winton. I'm just I know. Look, obviously he's one of the anchors and the pillars of the defense, but how last year there was a couple games where it's just hey, he kind of took the game over. 2 pick sixes last year, the one against Edmonton and one against Hamilton. So I'm kind of looking for that performance. Another Jake Serezna masterclass. Jared Brinkman getting involved again. I truly believe this is going to be a game that's going to be won and lost in the trenches. And Toronto, I think, knows how to win those kind of games. Obviously, Saskatchewan's been in a lot of close games, but they thrived off of other teams' bad execution. They thrived off of Hamilton shooting themselves in the foot 2 weeks in a row. And they thrived off of, the same thing with MBT out in Edmonton. So I trust Toronto more to, in those tight games to really solidify themselves, because we've seen it so far in their 2 games this year that were tighter, against BC and against Edmonton. When it came down to the nitty gritty, they found a way to win. And I think the same thing's going to happen on Thursday. One thing I do like for this game, though, is I do like the over of 48 points. I think it's another 31 to 27, 31 to 28 style football game that Toronto just squeaks out at the end. It's hey, we feel good about this, but we know we can get better kind of game. Build off of what we did tonight. Even though they're already out in they're already out in Regina. I believe they left this afternoon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they did leave. They did leave they did leave today, so they're probably already in Regina. Yeah, I can see that. I think for the Argos, for them to win this game, Cameron Dukes is going to have to make some throws that he didn't necessarily get against Montreal. So I think a bounce back game for him, and an important one for him, especially because people were ready to anoint him the starter for the rest of the year. A loss or 2 can make people rethink that a little bit.
That is
100%. Friday Night Football. Winnipeg versus Ottawa. Winnipeg, the slight favorite here, so I feel like the sports books are really depending on Winnipeg finally getting that first win. I've had a saying with Hamilton where I'm like, I'm gonna pick against them until they prove me wrong. I truly, truly think this is the game that Winnipeg wins. I know I might eat my own words here. I know they're 0-4 and Ottawa is looking really good, but like I said, I just can't see 0-5 happening. I think too, especially the way that some like I want to see because this is a test for Ottawa too because they're coming off a really emotional win. We saw this last year a bit when the Darren Crum story kind of faded away and they kind of fell back into old habits. Can Bob Dice bring his troops to stop that? And can Mike O'Shea get the best out of his guys that he has available? Obviously, look, Dalton Schoen gone for the year. Kenny Lawler still on the 6-game injury list. So will the big guys for Winnipeg show up? And it's this also kind of screams like Winnipeg win. Like they're at home. It's Friday night, 0-4. Like something inside me just says until proven otherwise, I trust Winnipeg more to get the win in a desperate spot than Ottawa coming off of such an emotional victory. Because sometimes with those teams where you're still trying to figure them out, no matter the sport, after an emotional victory, that's where the letdown spot can occur.
Go ahead.
I think for this game, Winnipeg, the real question too is Chris Trevor going to be the one starting this game? Because I know Zach Claros he's dealing with an injury too, so that's going to be a factor as well. The injuries I think are starting to catch up to Winnipeg here, but at the same time, why in a close game like this, I think it's going to be a close game. What gives me a little pause for Ottawa to win this is because it's in Winnipeg, and that's always a tough place to come in and get a win. Even when Winnipeg is not playing well, there's still part of me that thinks that they're gonna find a way at home.
I'm unfortunately going to regret probably this one too. I'm making a bad decision here, but I'm picking Ottawa, and I'm picking Ottawa simply because, if nothing else, this team has had so much difficulty gathering momentum, and all of a sudden they have some, and I think they appreciate it, and I think this organization appreciates it, and I think this visit to Winnipeg. The way the Argos going to Mosaic means a lot to them. It's an opportunity to prove what they've done and can do on the road, and this is going to be a great teaching and learning moment for the Ottawa Red Blacks. Is Winnipeg 0-5 after this? It could very well be, but it's less about them being 0-5. It's more about their team without their starting quarterback, without some key players on offense, and they're in a susceptible situation. Ottawa, on the other hand, is playing with the guys they need to play with, so they have an advantage. Will I be surprised if Winnipeg wins? No, it won't surprise me because I agree with everything you said, David. But at the end of the day, I like Ottawa's momentum, and maybe it's just a football fan here wanting to see an organization, and as spoken to earlier, the fans deserve a run like this, the Ottawa fan.
So when I said my points, it's just more of the emotional roller coaster, and that kind of goes into our next game as well, where you have Montreal coming off of an impressive win against Toronto, and you have Calgary coming off an emotional win. A close, tight game against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Because Calgary, going back to last year, I'll always remember this, just because throughout all my best bet articles that I do, it was Toronto's first loss of the year. Calgary was a huge underdog in the game. They were plus 7.5. The next week, they were going to BC, where BC lost bad the week before. Calgary coming off emotion, and I said BC's going to run them off the field, and they did just that. And I honestly think that's what's going to happen Saturday night. It's minus 10.5 for a reason. I think this is the kind of game where we're reminded, what, like David said, punching above their weight class, that this is the kind of game where I think we're going to realize, Montreal's really good. This is the game where everyone kind of looks at them and goes, oh, hey, Calgary, 2-2, bit of a step back. And also because of this game, I trust Cody Fajardo more than I trust Jake Mayer. I'm just keeping it short and sweet like that. I wouldn't be shocked if this was like what Montreal did to Ottawa 2 weeks ago. I would not be shocked if we saw the same result, but with Calgary.
What makes this a tough game for Calgary? You're traveling west to play the East team. That's always one. And like I was talking to Ryan Dinwiddie, it's always tough for the teams that are traveling. And they have to make that, especially if it's a shorter week. For Toronto, it's a short week, so something to think about there. But for Calgary's sake, a little bit of a shorter week, and you're playing against a team that's just got everything kind of working for them. So there's not really like a weakness to exploit right now. So you're going to have to play as much mistake-free football as you can. I don't know if Calgary is going to be able to do that because Montreal is going to dial up the pressure. They're going to go after Jake Mayer. They're going to force him to make mistakes, and that gives me. I just can't bet on Jake Mayer to beat this Montreal team that's looked so far. It's a team that looks really hard. Like it's going to be any team that beats Montreal is going to have to really earn it. I don't know if Calgary's at that point yet.
I like Calgary. I like what they've done. I like what Jake Meyer's done. Over this season. He's proved to be a better quarterback than he's been in the past. He looks a little more like the quarterback Calgary thought they had, which is why Bo Leibler became expendable. I like also, you guys are talking all logic here. I'm going to talk silly now. What I'm going to say is this. Winnipeg Blue Bombers, when they were on their magic tear and their magic run, all the Grey Cups, winning Grey Cups, Montreal would go visit them in Winnipeg and beat them. And Montreal was not a very good team. I think, and Calgary, sorry, I keep getting Winnipeg in my head. Calgary did the same thing when they were great, and Montreal came in and beat them. I'm wondering if Calgary pays them back a little bit, and the mouse roars, right? Because that's what this is going to be. It's going to be a team like Calgary that has a lot to prove, and there's a lot of pride on that team. I like the people involved in that organization. That organization is very proud. There's nothing I think they'll enjoy more than beating Montreal. They'll be focused. I won't be surprised if Montreal, does a number on them, plays a tune on them. I won't be surprised by that. But I won't be surprised if Calgary puts up a really good fight. They've surprised us over the past couple of years each and every time. I don't think any of us thought they'd make the playoffs the way they were playing early in the season last year, and they ended up making the playoffs. And they ended up playing in the Western semifinal. That's, I think, who Calgary is. They're a real proud organization. They're well put together organizationally, and I think they can do something here against a team that, as you talk about Winnipeg having the ability to win one, you can also say the same thing about Montreal being able to lose one.
That's very fair. It's just like, and folks, for those of you guys who weren't around for the last time, like it was the three of us podcasting. Frank gave us a great podcast title with Ice Cream Aficionado Case, and now he gave me another one with I'm going to talk silly. This is the kind of game where either we can come back to this if we do this, because I feel like it'd be fun to do this once a month, but where we look at this game and it's either look, Frank can come in and be like, hey, he's right or not. It's just my thing with that is just I understand the get back narrative, and I love that you brought that up. But for me, it's just until proven otherwise, I'm going to trust with what's been working in the CFL. Because Calgary last year, they did that a bunch where like they would have one good week and then they have one bad week. Or even how I look back to a game like last year, the game in Toronto, where look, neither offenses were going, defenses were just getting carved up, and then it took special teams and that Javon Leake returned for Toronto to beat Calgary. And you know what? If we do this game before, I'll probably pick Calgary to beat Toronto because for some reason they struggle out west, that's just nature of the beast. But for this game here, I think coming east is going to play a big factor. And also, too, it's only Montreal's second home game of the year. And the fans last time showed up and were loud. So I expect that to be another big factor into this game, too. But we'll ultimately wait and see what happens. And then we transition to Sunday where, like I said earlier, we got two cats fighting. You've got the Mighty Lions of British Columbia taking on the Tie Cats of Hamilton. I know I got very metaphorical there with that one, but this is a game where BC's only a 5-point favorite. I don't know if Hamilton wins, but I wouldn't be shocked if this is another come down to the wire game where, look, I think more than BC winning this, I think this could be just another case of Hamilton loses this game.
At home, it's tough. BC plays so much better at home than they do on the road, so that's something to consider there. I think Hamilton beat BC in Hamilton last year, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody can easily correct me on that.
Hamilton
Uh,
beat them in BC, and I think BC beat Hamilton in Hamilton.
okay, like I
I'll
could
look that
see
up.
Hamilton winning this game again, but you're right, Griff. They're gonna have to not make those mistakes that they've been prone to make. Like BC has looked good. Then I can't really put my finger on it right now with BC. I feel like they should be better than they've looked so far. So still a little bullish on them, but I think this is a game here where Hamilton's gonna be desperate. They're gonna be so desperate to get that win that either BC is gonna take advantage of that or they're gonna fall into that trap. So that's kind of where I'm at with this game.
So, Frank, before you talk, can I just update about what happened last year?
Okay.
How wrong
So,
am
so BC Hamilton beat BC in BC by a score of 30-13, and BC beat Hamilton and Hamilton by a score of 33-30 late in the season, week 17.
Yeah. So BC has had a hard time against Hamilton. I think that bodes well for Hamilton in that regard. Like I think there's a little more confidence. It was a bad loss against Ottawa. It was a close loss, right? So I think that gives them maybe a little bit of hope that they can keep this close. If Hamilton keeps it close, I like their chances in this game. BC is going to have to take them out of it, I think, early. Force Hamilton off their game plan, whatever the game plan is against them.
What we saw with BC playing in Hamilton is that they weren't they didn't have the kind of mojo that I expected from them. I don't know why, but they didn't. But looking at them playing Hamilton, Hamilton's got something to prove. This is I'm starting to sound like Griff. Sorry, Griff. Until Hamilton proves me wrong. I had a lot of hope in them when the season started, but now they've done their own thing on their own positive response from me. I'm picking BC only because I think BC has a lot of pressure on them to finish first. They want so bad to finish first. This is the team that's got the Grey Cup home game, and there's always, the team that has the home game in the Canadian Football League. There is this pressure that you don't really see, but it exists, and BC's going to really try to get into first, and they got to beat teams like Hamilton, as we all said in this broadcast. You got to beat the teams you can beat.
So I'm kind of twist torn here because there's the Argonaut fan in me that's saying I would love for Hamilton to get their first win of the season, and then in 2 weeks, Toronto makes a trip down to the QW and embarrasses them because that would just crush their spirits. But then there's the realist in me that doesn't want to steer away from his opinion of don't trust Hamilton until they prove you wrong otherwise. And I'd rather be wrong picking against them. So that's why I'm going to go BC. It's like you just said, Frank. This is a game where if you are the Lions, you go in there and you roar loud. You go in there and show the world, hey, we're not going to take care of them. Because if you remember last week too, they narrowly escaped. They narrowly escaped Edmonton. That's a game that I think BC should have won by a lot. Last year, BC just dominated them. I believe there was two shutouts on separate occasions, which I believe were BC's first shutouts since the 70s. Fun fact of the day. So this is the kind of game where if you're the BC Lions and you want to establish yourself as a legit contender, you don't let an 0-4 team beat you. You beat an 0-4 team in their own building. I think I think that first game for them losing that, honestly, kind of woke something up in them to where it's like, hey, we're not just going to walk in and take around everything. Like, obviously, Toronto went tit for tat with them, but you know what? I think this is a game where Rick Campbell just kind of gets the guys. Vernon Adams Jr. He's really calmed down a lot since week one, like in a good way. He's playing a little more calmer. He's not getting as many So he's basically letting the game flow and get to him as it can. But like I said, I'm going on and on. The only thing I say about this game is I like the BC Lions, but I also like the over. I think this is a shootout. I do think this is a shootout. Just at the end of the day, I'm going to trust the Lions more than I trust the Tabbies.
Yeah,
It's very fair.
My little monologue there of all things CFL. and all our things CFL because look, the three of us, we like talking about this league. This is a fun league to talk about. And folks, the action's always exciting up north.
It always is. I mean, especially in the summer months where crowds get a little more excited. There's a little more juice. Hopefully, more families will come out and enjoy some football. And let's go for it. Let's get a. I want to see chaos this summer. I want to see. I don't want to see boring, predictable games. I want some unpredictability.
Well, the kickers had their way with the teams this past weekend. The kick returners, they haven't been as spectacular as they've been in the past seasons. The game is much more exciting when the kick returners break a few. We'll see if that trend returns. We'll see.
You know what? And my other thing too is with this game as well is I'm just waiting for like how I say the Winton McManus moments just because like it was so much fun to watch a guy like Winton return a pick six and then Dinwiddie saying that he's going to get caught or he's going to get slowed down and then for Winton to go back and say I wasn't getting caught. No, that was not happening. Or even too for like how you have the random players that will emerge and just have a big game out of nowhere. It's the funness of the league. It's just how everything goes with the league and honestly, there's no other league like it. And besides, too, for all you Americans out there, it is available on CBS Sports Network. And for everyone saying, I'm waiting for college to come back, waiting for the NFL to come back, CFL is there to take care of you. Don't you worry.
A little bit of an education, but it's there.
Great point. But anyway, gentlemen, it's a blast as always getting to do this with the two of you. Like I said, if you guys, I believe we did this in June before the season. We're doing it in July now, so we'll see you guys again in August. Folks, 300's coming in a couple weeks. Final details are getting sorted out. Will be tweeted out when they're ready. But for myself, David Morisuti, Candid Frank Live, Frank Stanishi, I'm Griff. Enjoy week 5 of the CFL season, folks, because why? Because football's